Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford.
And I'm Peter Glassford.
So, Peter, and this is going to sound super scripted because it is, have you ever been interested in martial arts?
Not really.
I actually felt really bad for today's guest because I feel like when you emailed him at first, you were like, I have no interest whatsoever in any kind of martial arts at all.
I think I was more tactful than that, but I was very forward with that. I am definitely a lover and not a fighter. And while I'm interested in the movement, style or the fact that as humans we certainly have grappling and hand-to-hand combat, in our blood, in our genes, so to speak. I'm pretty adverse to conflict, but that I was open to this idea of self-defense, which is really what Krav Maga was.
Which is what we're talking about today.
So we have Dan Gador with us today, which is very phonetic, so I had the pronunciation down today.
For once, yeah.
But yeah, he did a good job of explaining sort of what it is, and he's from Israel, right?
Tel Aviv,
and so right where it's from, so where this discipline has originated from, it's becoming much more popular here in North America, but as always, we've sort of North Americanized this discipline. So he was telling us sort of where you can find it. He gave us some examples in both the U.S. and Canada, a couple places that we can look into it, but also suggested that we go to Israel,
which might be on our bucket list now. I will back up and say that today's episode is about Krav Maga, which for those of you who don't know, because Peter didn't know and I was really excited. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a Krav Maga guy that wants to talk to us. Peter's like, what the heck's Krav Maga? It's a self-defense system developed by the Israeli Defensive Forces that combines kind of the best of all martial arts and street fight techniques and teaches you, in essence, to kind of just be a total badass.
Yeah, lots of discipline. It's usually the good thing with martial arts is that there's a lot of pretty scripted movements. Usually, there's a progression that you're following. You're getting different levels. Most of them will thrive or emphasize what am I looking for?
Self-defense?
Not self-defense.
Self-awareness?
No, discipline.
Okay.
Self-discipline, which is pretty attractive, I think, in today's everyday life where we can have whatever we want. You can microwave whatever you want whenever you want, and the internet's there all the time. Mm-hmm. You can Google it. I think more and more we're going to be looking for these outlets where we can go and see some progression, move, exercise, have some social community. There's a lot of good things about the combat sports or the martial arts, I think, that, a lot of us are missing.
Yeah, I think what I really love about Krav Maga from a totally practical standpoint is, it teaches you how to actually defend yourself, unlike some of the kind of, as he put it, I think the more artsier of the martial arts that teach you how to do cool moves that look wicked, but realistically, if somebody grabs you from behind, the move might not actually work.
So it's basically just street fighting is what Krav Maga is. If you wanted to really sort of boil it down, I don't know that I'm not certified to boil it down like this, but basically it's all, anything goes, how you would survive if someone attacked you, on a dark night, you're in a city, mm-hmm. and, someone attacked you, and, what you would do to get out of it. So
a lot of going for the groin, but, for the groin efficiently.
Yeah, but, whether someone has a knife or whatever. So they go through a lot of simulation. They have a couple different ways they do that, which Dan talks about. They talk about, he talks a bit about the belt system, but we didn't get in a lot about the specifics of that, but more what a class looks like, how to be ready for a class, as always, so sort of what's the cool move to be ready for. And I think one of the really cool takeaways that we can sort of generalize to a lot of sports, and I've been really trying to pay attention with on my bike the last little bit, is this idea of being present. So a big part of Krav Maga is trying to avoid conflict. So similarly, when I'm out riding my bike, trying to, I can think about different ways I can dodge and skid and, turn sharply and bunny hop over stuff. But if you're really aware, a lot of the times, you could be really good at just avoiding, dogs running out at you or, different, cars trying to, door you or cars trying to turn right in front of you. There's a lot we can do if we're really, really present and not, super, into our podcast or looking at our Garmin or things like that, right? So I've been trying to take this idea of just really, surveying the environment, which is always changing as we're riding and stuff. And so that's, we talk a lot with this idea with Dan, and he says it's, and I believe him, it's pretty life changing when you start doing this, and, you start doing it automatically wherever you are.
Yeah, so even if you are not interested in Krav Maga, I think there's still a ton of really good takeaways from this episode.
As always, I think a lot of, things we can generalize and take from the coaching and from the movement and just from the mindset, which is a big part of this Krav Maga.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into it. Enjoy this episode with Dan Gador.
Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Molly and I are here today with Dan Gador. And he's over near Tel Aviv, and he'll give us the names of the places a little more accurately than I could pronounce them. But he is a Krav Maga teacher, coach. He has 3 businesses there. And yeah, he's been doing it for a long time. So he's going to tell us more about this this discipline of Krav Maga, what it is, where what it started as, and what it's maybe become in North America, and how this discipline can help us become more consummate athletes. So Dan, welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and I am saying your name correctly, right? It's Gador, Dan Gador?
Yeah, and actually I was quite surprised to hear that you pronounced it exactly as it was supposed to.
Okay. Well, I think it worked into my favor because I try and pronounce what I believe phonetic is, I guess, and often it doesn't work out. So I think in this case, maybe it has. So that's great.
Yeah,
great start.
That worked perfectly.
All right, crushing it.
Awesome. So we were sort of emailing back and forth beforehand, and I was saying, I've been interested in martial arts and stuff generally. I know it's sort of part of the human nature to have some sort of grappling and fighting and defense and stuff, that's sort of wired into where we've come from as a species and whatnot, but it's sort of, not part of a lot of, at least, the North American lifestyle, I guess now is pretty removed from that. So it's something that I've had my eye on. There's a lot of good work ethic and methodology built into a lot of these combat sports and martial arts and stuff. So, Molly had mentioned Krav Maga actually a while ago, and then we sort of connected with you. So I'm excited today just to hear more about this discipline and what it is and what it isn't. And yeah, so with that in mind, did you want to give us just sort of a brief intro to sort of how you found Krav Maga?
Yeah, sure. I started training at Krav Maga when I was about 10. And the truth is that I went there because a lot of my friends did, and it was a very social place, a very social thing to go to. And the methodology there, the way that they taught us the techniques was very, very enhancing as a human being, because a very, very important thing in Krav Maga is to be able to analyze whatever's going on around you socially, and actually be prepared to a lot of things before they happen. So that was actually very, very helpful for me as a kid growing up.
Yeah, for sure.
Socially as well as, but also socially. I mean, not only did it help cope with all kinds of fears that might happen, but it helps you really understand what's going on around you at in school and at parties and everywhere. I mean, it's a very, very interesting thing of a way of actually looking at the situation that you're in, which I found really, really exciting as a kid. And as I continued to learn, I started instructing. I actually got into instructing, maybe 2 or 3 years after I started to learn. I was pretty young back then. I had a course. It was like instructors, helpers kind of course. And then I did an instructor course a couple of years later, and I've been instructing ever since.
That's awesome. I love to think about it in social situations. I feel like you probably were so much better at like making friends and sort of reading, situations at parties and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it really helps a lot because you really get to understand body language in a very, very high kind of subconscious level. because you can really understand when people get frustrated or annoyed or when they're relaxed.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really quite helpful
So
on a psychological level.
I love
I
that.
how so can you give me and it might be hard to verbalize this without being face to face or in the gym together or something, but what would be the drill or the setting that then would help you read that? Like, would we be simulating sort of someone getting frustrated, or like how do you build that sort of awareness?
Well, there are different ways to build that awareness. One of them is by looking at videos. One thing that can be done is we have we have in the WhatsApp, and we see a lot of videos of live scenarios, live things that happen, and we can really analyze the situation there. We can see if a man is pulling out a knife. You can actually see the way he walks. You can see the way he takes his hand towards his pocket. You can see all that, and you can learn to analyze that. In addition to that, during classes, sometimes in the middle of a completely unrelated drill, I'd send one of the students to go and choke someone else or go and attack him from behind with like a rubber knife, something like that. And people can really learn to feel the people around them, see how they move. Um, I remember this one time I was really, really fascinated by my instructor's instructor. He could see someone doing a drill, and he would know the exact position of his body, even on the other side of the person. I mean, he could know where your fingers are located, even if he can't see your hand. And that was actually very, very interesting. I really liked that. And as I evolved in the Krav Maga, then I could really do that myself. So now I can see when someone walks a bit funny, I know why he's walking funny, where he has something hidden. Is there? It's really you should see it happening.
Yes, I think that's it. And I mean, it might be shocking to someone who's not taken any sort of martial arts or something like that, but I think that's a good answer. Like it's through sort of simulations, that you start seeing sort of what someone has to do just before they pull a knife, right? So that might be, how they arrange their feet, or like you say, something in just their demeanor, I guess, their how they're acting just before, even when they're simulating and they're not actually trying to pull a knife,
Yeah.
they have to do certain things. And is that sort of what you start sort of sensing or seeing? I
Yeah.
guess, yeah.
Plus, you see that there is a different. Um, your hand is positioned differently when you're trying to grab something, say, like your cell phone in your pocket, or when you're trying to grab something that is um, more knife shaped. Because if you do with your hand and you would try to do the motion of grabbing something that is fairly big, like a cell phone, or try to grab something that is fairly like small or thin, like a knife or like a pen, you would see that you do a different position, you do a different grabbing thing with your hand, and you can see that you can see um, the different grab.
Right,
You can
and
see that.
even the setup, yeah, I can see definitely, and that's the listeners could maybe try that,
I was gonna say I'm doing it right now, and I'm seeing what you're saying.
grab your
So
phone versus grab a pen or something like this, and yeah, no, I can see that, and I remember I've taken a bit of karate and a couple sort of related things like that, and I remember there was some stuff with like if someone's about to kick you or about to punch you, like punching especially, I think like there's a certain like they have to do something with their feet, right? Like you can't just stand like you're talking to someone and punch them.
Right.
Like if you're going to really wind up and punch someone, you sort of have to like step backwards and then like unload onto the front foot, just like you would with like a baseball or something. Um, and so I imagine
Yeah,
that that's the type of stuff you
in
start
many
seeing.
martial arts you would do that. I do my best to teach someone to throw a punch without um, without doing that pre-punch move.
Don't tell me that.
Uh,
That's my survival tactic for when
yeah.
I'm in bars and stuff.
Well, you just
well,
haven't come up
most of the
against a
time,
Krav Maga person yet. So, actually, on that note, maybe this is a good time to ask how Krav Maga differs from something like karate or like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or any of that stuff that we see that's also pretty popular right now.
Yeah. Krav Maga was developed um, in order for it to be a defensive technique for street fights, basically. Um, and it does that very well. Now, if you would seek the origins of many other martial arts, you would see that judo, for instance, it's called a martial art, but it's a sport. You have
Hmm.
very, very specific things that you can or cannot do. There are very specific ways in which you gain points. We don't have points in Krav Maga. We don't have um, competitions in Krav Maga because it's very hard to compete when um, all the time you're trying to kick the other guy in the groin or pull his eye out, you know.
Yeah, the goal is to
How would
not
you gain
die.
points to something like that?
Right. Okay. That's it. That's a good differentiation. And you're selling me. I like things that don't, like, skateboarding before they added points to skateboarding and things like this. I like things that don't necessarily have points, but are more
Mhm.
just a practice, right? And
And I think that we were both saying,
Yeah.
like, for us, Krav Maga is interesting because we're not necessarily, yeah, like out to fight somebody or like compete in fighting someone or win fighting someone. It's
Hmm.
more about being prepared to
preparedness,
fight
right?
someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I like that.
Yeah.
So then,
I
go
don't know
ahead.
how exactly it translates to English, but in Hebrew there is a differentiation between a omanut lechima, which is a martial art, and a shitat lechima, which is yeah, it's more of a fighting technique, which is not an art. And the reason we do that differentiation is because Krav Maga is a very ugly method. You won't see any um, double kicks while bouncing in the air, you know, and doing all kinds of really, really cool kind of stuff. But you will get a feeling that you are absolutely 100% prepared to whatever comes and attacks you when you're walking down the alley alone.
Hmm.
Okay.
I
So
love it.
so then who would be taking these classes? Like what sort of range of people would you have in your three locations there?
Other than the obvious Israeli Defense Forces.
Yeah.
Well, the defense forces have their own instructors. I do a bit of instructing to defense forces, but not a lot. I
Hmm.
primarily teach civilians. I have a lot of young kids from first graders to 6 or 7 graders. Um, I have groups of adults. Um, I think the oldest guy I used to teach was about 50 years old. He was a very interesting guy that I used to instruct. And actually, I instructed everyone a very, very wide um, range of ages. Um, but mostly kids go and do it because their parents really want them to be able to develop their self-confidence.
Hmm.
And Krav Maga, it really does that. It's a very, very, very major thing that it does.
So now BJJ and some of these other martial arts, you're gonna potentially not get hurt, but like you're gonna get beat around a little bit. Is there like do you get beat up at the class? I guess is without asking it more artfully, but you know what I mean? Like are you getting slammed onto the mat and maybe, having losing, your breath or something? Like how I guess how
Yeah.
violent and then how theoretical it is, right? Like are we using you mentioned rubber knives and stuff. Like, what's sort of the situation when you go to a class?
Well, when you go to class, you learn techniques. A very big part of the lesson is you learn techniques and you practice those techniques. Now, some of those techniques can get very aggressive even while you're practicing them in class. You do get tossed around a bit and you do fall on your back and you may, twist your hand. But while you're practicing the techniques, you usually don't get hurt. In addition to the techniques, there are classes in which we put on protective gear, and usually one puts on protective gear. He grabs either a knife or a stick, and he just goes around and beats everyone up. And everyone is supposed to. Yeah, it's a very fun practice actually, because
Mm-hmm.
the person who's defending, he can now hit as hard as he wants anywhere he wants. You can kick to the groin, you can kick to the head, you can do whatever you want. And the other person, he just doesn't stop. It's like fighting in in your worst nightmare. So we do get a taste um, of aggressive kind of fighting, and we do get a lot of training on the technique itself, the technique, and on the principles that are behind the technique.
Right.
Hey everybody, we're going to interrupt the podcast for just a second for a quick word from a new sponsor.
Are you a consummate athlete? I think so.
I think so too.
Why don't you head over to healthiq.com/consummateathlete, help out the podcast, and also check out your Health IQ. In addition to being a health insurance company, a life insurance company, Health IQ has a really great website. They have really cool articles that they're posting all the time on their own blog and also just sort of their feed. I clicked on actually 3 or 4 while I was there, just interesting articles that popped up. So it might be a real great website to visit just on the regular anyhow, even if you don't want life insurance.
That said, life insurance has been something that you and I have actually been talking about a ton recently. And the cool thing about Health IQ is they actually have special rates on life insurance for consummate athletes.
Yeah, they basically advocate for lower rates for healthy people. You know, your weightlifters, your runners, your cyclists.
High five.
Yeah, I guess high five if you're one of those people. And so basically they're trying to leverage the fact that there's lower risk for cancer, say 45% lower, even 18% lower heart disease risk, and 28% lower risk of early death for active people. So
Double
again,
high five.
that's great. So why would you pay those higher rates, that are taking those averages, all those people who are, doing those unhealthy things, they're not out running, putting in the miles, being healthy. So yeah, basically their idea is that, getting lower rates for life insurance, which might fit into your sort of overall financial plan, or it may not. But in any case, why don't you head over to healthiq.com/consummateathlete. Again, help out the podcast, check out some cool articles, maybe take a few of their quizzes. I actually got 2 wrong on their weightlifting quiz.
Wah, wah.
So, still a pretty good score, though. I think I beat 63 million Americans. So why don't you go to healthiq.com, see how many Americans you can beat.
It's weird.
I apologize to the Americans. You could beat an American if you were an American. That happens.
I forgot you were Canadian there.
healthiq.com/consummateathlete. Thanks, guys.
And now back to the podcast.
How do kids, I would imagine that, young gentlemen especially would be quite into that exercise.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Young kids are really excited about that exercise. Although I do prefer that young girls come and practice. Young girls that come and practice, they don't look exactly for the aggressive kinds of classes, but they really go there because they want to learn how to defend themselves. And you can see that different mindset in the class itself. Well, you see that especially the younger kids, usually they they punch each other and they kick each other, just to have some fun. And the girls are there, they're like the police officers there. They're like, you stop that. I want to learn this.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Right.
So it's actually very interesting.
Yeah, and there's
really
definitely, there's something empowering about that, and for boys or girls, learning to deal with those situations, and it would be in a more playful, artificial way in the class. But like you say, there's someone with a stick and you want to try to, subdue that person to try and not get hit with the stick again, right? Like, So I mean, it's a good way like to confront those fears of being in a bit of conflict, and that would translate into confidence in your normal daily life for sure.
And like I said,
Definitely.
I think that's why we're seeing it grow in the U.S. too, is because women are definitely looking for something, that isn't like, I'm going to do this cool jujitsu move to take down this guy that's trying to attack me. Like, I have no problem going for the groin if someone is trying to attack me. So.
Yeah, I remember I went to a Krav Maga dojo somewhere in the States. I don't remember where it was. And the instructor there, he thought I was a new student because he didn't know me. I didn't say that where I was from or what I knew or didn't know. So when he tried to impress me in order for me to stay for more classes, he did a very interesting move. It was like he climbed on his opponent and choked him with his legs and brought him to the ground. It was very beautiful to see and completely irrelevant to the street. Absolutely.
I mean, for one
You
thing, you
could
don't want to be
never
on your
do
back in a bar. Like that's just.
no, no. But it was very aesthetically pleasing to the eye.
Hmm.
It was really beautiful to see.
Okay, so now if someone was, we talked earlier before we started about sort of in North America, there's been, as you say, more of an aesthetic or more of a drill based or art based sort of thing, and it's maybe separated a bit from that like raw in street fighting or like self defense type
Mhm.
thing. So is there anything that you can say when someone was looking for a class or an instructor? Is there a question or something they might look for?
That would kind of, I guess, make it more of like the pure, like actual Krav Maga versus the more aesthetic stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, there are several mainstreams of Krav Maga that are being taught in Israel, and um, most of the time, if the instructor there went and learned Krav Maga in Israel, he would have at least a bit of the real hardcore Krav Maga. Um, I did not see a Krav Maga instructor who did not learn in Israel, and that I liked the Krav Maga that he did. I'm not saying that there aren't any, but I did not meet any of them when I was traveling around the States.
Yeah, that
Uh,
makes sense.
Okay.
I like that.
Because I mean, one of the questions I always ask is like, if we were going to immerse ourselves and go on a Krav Maga vacation, where would we go? So you would say Israel. We would come and see you.
I would say Israel definitely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right, honeymoon
Most
destination right
mainstreams of
there.
Most mainstreams of Krav Maga, if you talk a main instructor there, you could actually come and have a week, 2 week, or a month long um, like a training session. Because most big places have trainings almost every day, so you can really go and train for 3, 4, 5 hours a day every day of the week.
Wow.
If your intentions are to really come and get yourself immersed in Krav Maga.
Oh my gosh, I can like see Peter's eyes lighting up right now. He's
Yeah.
like, new honeymoon plan. We're gonna learn how to do this.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
like it.
No, that's awesome. I mean, it's some sports are hard to do that, and sometimes there isn't like an obvious place to go. So that's awesome that the answer is straightforward, and also that it's possible, right? Like again, finding a place to, as you say, immerse yourself for several hours a day is sometimes troubling. Even for something
Yeah,
like surfing or swimming or something, right? Like where or skiing would be another example where
Hmm.
you're somewhat at the whim of instructor times or weather or both.
yeah.
Um, what about other sports? Have you seen like athletes from other sports using Krav Maga as sort of their cross training?
We have a lot of people who who do like CrossFit and stuff,
Hmm.
TRX and all kinds of bodybuilding kind of things, and they come and do Krav Maga because they have all the main sports they do it elsewhere, and then they come to Krav Maga just for the techniques, because it helps them with their self confidence. Um, but Krav Maga is very hard to combine with say with MMA and stuff like that, with mixed martial arts, because you can't compete with it.
Hmm.
It doesn't help you in other sports in that way.
Yeah, that might actually be detrimental to your MMA because you'd spend the whole fight trying to remember if you were allowed to do a move that you know or not. Like, oh crap, sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to kick you in the groin. It was just my other training.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Now, what about have you seen athletes? So there's the CrossFit sort of strength training athletes. People have done that. Is there someone who's come from another like sport, like anything, runners or maybe a power lifter or something like that, who've then come and been like really good, like they've picked it up quickly?
Most of the times, if someone is very, very good at a different martial art, he would have a tendency to pick up the technique really quickly. Although he will have, I call it residue of the other techniques because there are some different things, even in the basics of how you give a punch, how you throw a punch, and how you kick and how you stand. But if someone is a high enough level in any other martial art, he can definitely come and pick up most of the um, uh, he can pick up very easily most of the techniques of the Krav Maga, uh, and of course, if he has the mindset of the Krav Maga, then the techniques are secondary. All the techniques that we teach, all of them are obviously they're very good. They work, but the most important thing that we teach there is um, how to get out of situations by yourself. I mean, if someone throws a punch a bit differently than what you know, you would still be able to block it. So you do the defense a bit differently, but if you know what's standing behind the techniques, then it will be much easier for you to defend yourself against whatever comes.
Hmm.
So if someone comes and he knows his body well, not necessarily with martial arts, people who come from dancing, mostly women, but
Yeah.
men as well, people who come from any type of sport that really helps them, that forces them to be aware of their body, they would have a very good time learning Krav Maga.
Yeah, I could see that with like a ballerina in particular because they have to be aware of like where the other people in a ballet are, so they have like really good spatial awareness of that stuff too, plus the body
Mm-hmm.
awareness.
Mm-hmm.
As an Irish dancer, I had no such awareness. It was just me and arms don't move, so I would have been terrible.
Um,
I'm sure you weren't. Once you start doing it, you really understand that um, even if someone stands behind you and he's close enough to you, you can really visualize where his head is, where his arms are, where his chest is, where everything stands. It's
Yeah,
it's a it's a developable skill. Is that a
yeah.
word? Developable? I think it is.
We're gonna call it
We could
one
use
for
that.
sure. I think,
We could use.
yeah. To that point, though, I think women probably have that just because we're pretty conditioned to be super, like, hyper aware of, like, hey, there's a dude standing behind me, and, like, what am I gonna do? I know I
Yeah.
tell Peter, like, I go out on a run, and, like, my immediate thought if I see a guy, like, half a mile down the trail is to, like, start thinking about how I could run away from him or, like, what I could do if he comes after me. So I think women are just maybe like better set up for it because we've always had to think about that stuff.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
true. And while women are preconditioned to think that way, I think that um, society expects women to think that way. I see it all the time. I see it everywhere. But no one actually teaches women or people at all what to do with that awareness of theirs.
Yes. A hundred
Okay, so
percent.
okay, so you see a guy half a mile away from you, and you start thinking, okay, there's a guy there, and it's kind of frightening, and what should I do? And you're really aware of that, but what would you do about it?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, yeah. At the same time, like my answer would be like I'd sprint into the woods and hope I could outrun the guy. It would not be any kind of
yeah.
like efficient fighting or anything.
So we really teach a lot to the best way to win in a conflict is to not have it in the first place.
Hmm.
So if you can avoid fighting, that would always be better.
Hmm.
Uh, and that also is something that needs to be taught. That mindset, that way of thinking. Because if you see a guy half a mile away from you, and instead of thinking, if he's gonna come and grab me, I'll do this, and if he has a knife, I'll do that, and if he says that, I'll say this. If instead of doing all that, you can say, well, I could do a little detour,
Hmm.
and I just wouldn't run into him,
Yeah.
and that would be probably the best thing to be done.
mhm.
I like.
Um,
And I mean that would relate to we started off talking about, if you're in a room or, some place like the subway or something, and you're able to read people a little bit, then you might just gravitate to the other side of the subway or something, right? And is that something that
Mhm.
crosses your mind, even when you're out sometimes?
Oh, definitely, all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. It's not that I'm obsessed with thinking how I would react with if different situations occur, but in a subconscious level, I'm always aware that where the exits are and what I would probably do if a fire starts from there, or if a woman chokes from there, or if a guy, I don't know, starts screaming from the other side. Um, being aware of being aware that these things can happen, and then even subconsciously thinking how you should react in such a situation is a very good thing.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, there are many things that you can do in order to be prepared exactly to that kind of situation. Like you can go and do um, like first aid courses and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that really helps you a lot um, if you might encounter any kind of medical situation wherever you are. I mean, that being prepared doesn't mean only to be prepared against um, violent acts.
Right.
And in the Krav Maga, we don't only teach to be prepared against violent acts, because violent acts, although they're not very fun, and you really do want to be prepared in order whenever they come, but most of the time there are many different things that you need to react to on your day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you need to be aware when you're crossing the street, what could happen, what couldn't happen. It helps you drive better because you're better prepared to see someone braking in front of you. If you understand the way the road works, you know when someone is going to brake, you know when someone is trying to fishtail, and when all that kind of thing happens. And this is definitely an awareness um, that is not exactly taught in the Krav Maga, but you're kind of immersed in it when you go to a class. You're always aware of whatever's going on around you, and you're always trying um, to guess what's going to happen next, and how you're going to react to whatever's happening.
Hmm.
Yeah. I like that. It reminds me, like, right now you're seeing a lot about like mindfulness and mindfulness practices kind of all over. There's so many books and podcasts and stuff on that, and this actually sounds
Mm.
exactly like that, but kind of the more physical like version of it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I heard a story once about um, when when a kid is born. Okay, when a baby's born, don't put him in a class and teach him how to stand up and how to walk.
Hmm.
You don't sit him in front of in front of a blackboard, and you say, okay, these are your legs, and these are your hamstrings, and these are your quadriceps, and now you need to pull these, and that's the way you stand, that's the way you move. You don't do that. The way a baby learns how to walk is by trial and error. He tries to stand up, he tries to move his leg, he falls down a couple of times, sure, but you try to put him in a relatively safe environment where he can fall down and nothing bad will happen to him. So if you take the same thing and you put it in the Krav Maga lessons, you actually see that a lot of these mindfulness kind of courses, they're very, very good theoretically,
Hmm.
but the question is, how can you really put them in your life? How can you really practice it?
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
So you really should find a place where you would be completely immersed in it, and not just kind of theoretically speaking, thinking this should do that, and I should be thinking these kind of thoughts and not that kind of thoughts. You should actually put yourself in situations and see how that mindset works for you. That's the best way to develop it.
Yes, I think that, when we initially talked, my thought was, the combatives are, a part of our human nature or our human movements. And so I think you're exactly right. That moving meditation, or that meditation on our surroundings or awareness of our surroundings, that's part of it, right? Whether
running or on a bike or just walking through the subway and reacting to the people around you. It's all part of that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a really cool thought. You had a few ideas there, but I'm going to sort of ask the question and see if we can tease out something else here from you. Is there a move or something that at home someone might practice? What comes to mind for me based on what you've been saying, something like a sit up or some sort of calisthenics or something that you guys do a lot of in the class, and it's going to be a limiter for someone, like being able to be in a semi lunge stance or on your back, sort of defending yourself. Is there something like that someone before they maybe get to a class could start sort of just including in their daily routine?
I think the best thing that someone could include in his daily routine in order for him to be really, really good in Krav Maga is to start with the mindset, because that's really what's in the core um, of this martial art is the mindset. All You can do sit-ups, you can do pull-ups, you can do whatever you want for however all day long if you want, but it won't help you be a better Krav Maga artist if you're not aware of your surrounding. What I like to do when people come and want to learn Krav Maga and they ask me what they can do in order for them to be better at it, is I tell them that whenever they're out, walking, they should do all kinds of these mental games. Just think to yourself, if someone comes from there, can I run that way? Can I run that way? Maybe I should do like this. Maybe I should do like that. Whenever I see someone with pepper spray, I always go and tell them, you should always think about the wind direction. You should always think if it's the best thing to use. You should always play with yourself. Think about the situations that you're that you're in, and really try to understand how you should react if something happens. And then you start throwing different things that could happen, and then you just start thinking how you'd react to every different scenario that you thought about. So it's a really much more of a mindful kind of a mindset kind of thing, and not really a very physical thing.
I like it. So it's essentially like people watching as you're going through, and really, but not just people watching, but trying to think of how you might interact with people as you go through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you could say that.
Which is good. I think it gets people off their phones and thinking. That's a good one.
Definitely, people walking around with their eyes on their phone. That's like a plague of the. I can't understand that. It's ludicrous. I mean, I see people crossing the streets and they're not even looking sides. I mean, how do you even know if the light is green or is it red? I mean, I don't know. It's frightening. It's like strolling around the world with your eyes closed. You never know what you're gonna bump into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of the opposite of what you're describing. So.
Yeah, you kind of want to start like snatching their phone and handing them your business card. Come to my class and you can get this back.
Yeah,
you clearly need to learn
of
something.
me, you would have known I would take your phone.
Exactly. I had my hand ready for it and everything.
So I think probably last question. I mean, we can take this further too, but the last one I had was. In the first class, is there what should we expect? Someone coming in. Molly always wants to know the cool moves she can do, in the first day. But I think what she really wants to know is, you come into the class, you don't want to seem like a complete noob. So, what do we start with? Is there like a warm up, or what does it look like, when you come into the class?
I've just been at a lot of classes and been really awkward, so now I try to use this to figure out how to be cool.
Being cool 101.
Yeah, exactly. It's the whole point.
Well, first of all, you go into a Krav Maga class, and obviously you start with the warm-up. So the better shape you are, the better you're going to look in the warm-up, which is good. It's always a good thing to be able, to catch your breath quickly after you finish the running sessions, and to be able to finish all your push-ups. During the class itself, most of the techniques that would be taught in the first couple of lessons are very simple to learn. So it's actually very noob friendly
Hmm.
because it's so intuitive to learn them. Most of the moves are, um, you know how you if you go and scare a little kid, you would see him do a certain movement with his hand. If you do like you're gonna slap him or something, don't do it. But if you would do it if you're gonna slap him, you would see him doing a certain movement with his hand. So we take that movement and we turn that into a defense, and we do that all around. All the Krav Maga is based on that. So it's actually very very fast to learn. So a lot of new people who come and are really anxious about looking like they're new, um, that usually doesn't happen. If
Hmm.
you trust your instincts, if you trust your body to do whatever it's supposed to do, um, if you don't try to look like a sensei and you try to just do whatever you're told, that would be perfect, and that would always look good.
I like it. I guess my last question then is, what do you wear to class? Very important.
Yeah, it really is very important.
I'm just
In
picturing myself like showing up in like a full on like karate like uniform and no one else is wearing it or something. So
Basically, we have a t-shirt, and we have long pants that are kind of wide, so you could move freely in them. It's not really hard and strong fabric. It's really nice to wear, because basically you're supposed to be able to do whatever you learn there on every day. So you want to be able to move freely on one hand, but you really want to feel as comfortable as possible while you're doing it.
hmm.
So we don't have all kinds of these crazy gis and the hard pants and the vests and everything. You can actually go and look at some of my pictures online. You can see there exactly what we wear. It's a very day-to-day kind of clothing. Many women, when they come to class, they come with their tights and just a regular shirt, like a t-shirt,
Hmm.
a dry fit t-shirt, and that's perfectly fine until they get their yellow belt, and then they need to get like real Krav Maga clothes.
Yeah. Perfect. I've
um,
got yoga pants for days. I'd be good to go.
great, great. Yoga pants are fine.
Awesome. I mean, I'm excited for it, and yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to plan a trip to Israel
Yeah,
now.
I mean, the only thing is that now I feel like I'm going to be like pompous about all the North American ones, and
Yeah, right.
just
We're not gonna be able to go to ones in Toronto. We're just gonna be
yeah,
like, oh, you're not doing real Krav Maga.
yeah.
Well, actually, I know there are two guys who trained with me who teach. In one of them teaches in Toronto, one of them teaches
What?
in Cincinnati. Yep.
Okay, and we're going to
Uh,
Cincinnati this weekend, so
That's actually amazing. We really are going like next week.
really.
Yeah.
yeah. So is it easy to do their names, or I can just put them in the show notes? Maybe both. Who are
Um,
these men?
well, the guy in Toronto, his name is Gil, and you can find him. He's torontokravmaga.ca. You'd find his website. He started training a bit before me, and we've been training together for many many years. He just moved to Canada a few years ago and opened up a dojo up there. Uh, he's a really good friend of mine. You should check him out. And the guy in Cincinnati is CincinnatiCravMaga.com. You can find him. His name is Mike, and he's really, really a good guy. He came to Israel many times to practice. His students come to Israel to practice and to get their black belts. So these are two guys that I'm personally familiar with, and that I really, really enjoy um, to see them teach, see them work.
That's awesome, Peter. I feel like this is a sign.
I guess that's a sign because we're basically in Toronto right now, and we're going to Cincinnati here in the
And
next
going
week
to
or so.
Cincinnati, that's perfect.
So yeah, there you go. We'll go Toronto, Cincinnati, Israel. Will be the
Yeah,
plan
done.
there. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll hit you with all the links and stuff. Did you want to give us just your website? Again, I'll link to that in the show notes a bunch too. But your website, just so people can check out pictures and stuff.
Yeah, my website is dankravmaga.com, and right now it's in Hebrew, but an English version of it will come up soon. So you can just come into dankravmaga.com, and you'll have a little icon with the U.S. flag there, and you can change the language and it'll be very understandable for everyone.
Perfect.
Well, North America thanks you for that.
Yeah, right?
Coming down to our level. Yeah. So that's awesome. Awesome, Dan. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch soon. Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of your night, I guess?
Yes, I guess. No, your morning.
Yeah.
No?
No, it's actually night. It's 10 to 11 p.m. right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Thank
Okay,
you.
go to bed.
Go to bed. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Consummate Athlete podcast. We would love it if you'd go over to iTunes and leave us a review. And if you have any ideas or people you'd love to see on the podcast, feel free to tweet at us at Peter Glassford and at Molly J. Herford, or find us over at consummateathlete.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Just a reminder to head over to healthiq.com/consummateathlete to get your life insurance quote and find out how active people can get a good rate on their life insurance.